My name is William R. McCarthy, and these are my recollections of downtown Marysville as I practiced pharmacy there in the 1950s and 60s. I started working at Walgamont's drugstore in January of 1949. I was a senior in Marysville High School. My future wife, Ruth Nichol, also a senior, was already working there. My job was to come in at 7 a.m. before school, fire the furnace, and carry out the trash. After school, I waited on customers and stocked shelves. One of the jobs was to fill gallon jugs with sulfuric acid from large carboys. The acid would spill and eat through your shoes and clothes. There were no EPA regulations governing safety in the workplace in those days. Mr. Walgamont had came from Richwood and purchased the drugstore from a Mr. Fields on March 15, 1902. Mr. Fields established the store sometime after the Civil War. I was a pharmacy student in 1952 when Mr. Walgamont celebrated 50 years in business. Later, he sold his interest in the store to me on March 15, 1958. With Mr. Walgamont's encouragement, I started in pharmacy school at Ohio Northern University in the fall of 1949. As a student, I came home on weekends to work at the drugstore and to see my then girlfriend, Ruth Nichol. In 1949, Mr. Walgamont took on a partner, Robert Orhood, and moved the store from the southwest corner of the public square across the street to 110 South Main. Since this was a large room, he installed a soda fountain. He hired a former restaurant owner, Leo F. Butler, and his wife, Catherine, to manage the fountain. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, but both stayed there for many years until their deaths. The fountain, over the years, took on a life of its own and became the place to be in Marysville. In 1950, we had a blizzard, which stranded several hundred people traveling north out of Columbus after the Ohio State-Michigan Snow Bowl football game. Ruth was stranded in town and stayed overnight with my parents. The next day, we shoveled snow to free up sidewalks. Cars were left standing in the middle of the street because of the deep snow. After graduating from pharmacy school in 1953 and passing the state board, I began working as a pharmacist at the then Walgamont and Orhood drugstore. Because Mr. Walgamont had been in business for so many years, he had as many customers, the prominent families in town, including Dana Morey, Ralph Piper, Hubert and Dwight Scott of the O.M. Scott & Sons, Charles Mills and Paul Williams, both of whom became CEOs of the O.M. Scott's company, the Biamonte family, and many others. There were 3 drugstores in Marysville at the time: Walgamont and Orhood, Osmond's, and Congress. There was a bench that sat in the original drugstore in the square, on which all of the old men sat and talked to Mr. Walgamont about the affairs of the day. Many generations of Union County people sat on that bench while waiting on prescriptions. It was still in place when the store closed in 1998. Memorial Hospital opened on March 17, 1952. Broad-spectrum antibiotics were becoming popular at the time and controlled many serious infections. Polio, however, was not controlled, and both adults and children were affected. My future brother-in-law, Bill Nichol, was stricken with polio in the early 1950s, as were several other children in Marysville. He was admitted to Children's Hospital and placed in a ward with other children who had contracted the disease. Many were in iron lungs and did not survive. He was fortunate and did recover. Physicians who were active in the county in the 1950-1960 era were Doctors Longbrake, Snyder, Stricker, Calloway, Samsel, Burt, Collins, Marsh, Bollinger, Fuller, Zog, Angus McIver, Malcolm McIver, Herman Carr, and Dr. Zigmeyer, Hurl, Linscott, and Lee. As stated earlier, I purchased Mr. Wogamott's interest in the store on March 15, 1958. It then became Orahood and McCarthy Drug. We operated the business until 1971, at which time I purchased Mr. Orahood's interest and the store became McCarthy Pharmacy. Several things became unique about the pharmacy over the years. During the Orahood and McCarthy years, we remodeled the store. The Center of Science and Industry, COSI, was building the Hall of Yesteryear in their building on East Broad Street in Columbus. They were looking for drugstore fixtures from the early 1900s. They found out about our remodeling and contacted us about donating our fixtures to them. We did donate them, and they became part of their 1900-era display. Fast forward to 1998, when Rite Aid bought us out and moved us to their new location. COSI was moving to their new location on the river off West Broad Street. Two local young men were working for the firm doing the setup in the new COSI, and I contacted them about taking our fountain. They were looking for fixtures for the new Hall of Yesteryear from the 1950s. They could not take the whole fountain, but did take a substantial part, and it is in the new COSI. Another unique thing happened because we charged 5 cents for a cup of coffee, including cream and sugar, when the store opened with the fountain in 1949. We still charge the same 5 cents a cup when we closed in 1998. The 5-cent coffee was featured several times on Columbus TV and once was viewed on national TV. We heard about parents who received phone calls from their children who had moved to as far away as California, telling them of the coffee story at the drugstore in Marysville, Ohio. As a result of the popularity of the fountain, as I said, it took on a life of its own. And the result was the fountain became the meeting place for folks all over town. In the later years, it became popular for celebrating birthdays by buying coffee for the day for everyone. The senior citizen band would come in and entertain customers from 9 a.m. till noon. They would play for 3 hours, play any song you wanted, and never had a sheet of music in front of them. The number of downtown buildings has not changed much from the 1950s and 1960s till the 2000s. I have identified about 32 retail businesses, mostly locally owned, 5 churches, 3 drugstores, and 6 bars in the 5 or 6 block area of downtown Marysville in 1950-1960 era. Due to several fires downtown, notably the Dinner Bell restaurant, the Oakland Hotel with Ottie's clothing store damaged, the hardware and paint store on North Main, Carney's on the corner of South Main and 6th Street, and Hildreth's jewelry store on North Main, new buildings have been built. Today, there are less retail stores than in previous years, but a lot more offices and still several locally owned businesses. I count 92 businesses in the downtown core, not including the courthouse, but including 5 churches, fraternal organizations, real estate offices, financial offices, and so forth. Businesses which were downtown in the 1950-1960s who are still downtown are the Journal Tribune, Cook Real Estate, Avalon Theater, now empty, City Loan, Shear Insurance, now Shear Banks, and the Post Office. Gone are Carney's 5 and Dime, Weiss Brothers Clothings, A&P Grocery, First National Bank, Oakland Hotel, Little's Clothing, Ottie's Clothing, Roar Furniture, Alice's Dress Shop, Hafner's, Joe Simon Shoes, Isley's Ice Cream, Cousins and Ferns, Google Hardware, Springs Grocery, Swink's Meats, Hildreth's Jewelry, Galloway Shoe Store, First National Bank, Ben Bornheim's Grocery, Jack Fleming's Tack Shop, McCarthy Pharmacy, Conger's Drug, later Shields Pharmacy, Osmond's Drug, Faulkner Funeral Home, Thorpe Motors, H.I. Huffman Pontiac Buick, Evans Ford, Conrad Colin's Supply, Scott's Seed Company, Hafner's Clothing, Miller Furniture, Spain's Appliances, McAuliffe's, the Dairy Queen, and many more.